our People's Visioning programming again. We've been speaking to you over the last several weeks with different guests on our program, largely about the Right to Farm Amendment, and we will touch on that today. One thing about People's Visioning is we are a full vision and we work on all sorts of different issues, and Right to Farm was a national issue. It eventually became that through the course of the campaign. And today, Missouri is also in national highlights for other concerns that we will touch on as well, the events in Ferguson. And today I have a couple of guests with me. So I'd like to introduce them because we together will talk about these issues. And I'd like to introduce to you, and thank you for watching us, Nate Irvin. He's running for the 4th Congressional District to represent us in Washington, D.C. He's planning to, hopefully, for him, upseat Vicky Hartzler. And we have one of his campaign staff with us who I invited to be on to help give us some perspective about the campaign. And so I'd like to welcome Greg Hagan as well. So Nate and Greg, thank you for being on our program today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, so we're excited. And we want to thank you here, the viewing audience, for tuning in and watching us. And we'd also like to thank Sheila Kostler and Mediacom for doing this programming for us. So I have a couple of questions. And first of all, I'd probably like to just lay out a little bit of a foundation. I don't think many of us watching this program are unaware of events in Ferguson. We'll address that first. A young man who was just getting ready to go off to college, Michael Brown, was shot and killed under circumstances that are various accounts have been brought forth of what happened. Some accounts have been videotaped, and there are at this point, to fast forward through the demands really of people getting out in the streets and all of the things that went on in the streets, both in a peaceful and non-peaceful way, all of the circumstances have lent themselves to the fact that we now have a grand jury that is going to be investigating. We also have a second parallel investigation with the FBI, and also our lead legal person, our Attorney General. So we have things happening to address this, but we also have a lot of people calling for a new prosecutor. And so I'd like to just kind of let you comment on some of those things and fill in anywhere you might like on your thoughts on Ferguson and what, what as an elected official you might do. I know that we've had Claire McCaskill speaking out about this, and what your thoughts as a person and as an elected official would be on this issue.
Right. Well, first, let me say that no matter what perspective you come at it, I think that everybody can agree that it's absolutely tragic that a young man was gunned down. I think the circumstances and the facts will fully come out. I think Attorney General Eric Holder has done an excellent job at dealing with the situation, and more will come to light. But I think probably the biggest issue there ultimately is the over-militarization of the police force. We've gotten to a point where our police are so aggressive that you end up having more and more situations like this. And what's worse is whenever you have all these folks protesting, peacefully protesting, the police come in to enforce a curfew dressed in like essentially military gear with armored personnel vehicles throwing tear gas. And that to me comes to a situation where it's just insanity. It's not even recognizable as America anymore. It seems more like Nazi Germany than anything else. As far as the shooting itself, I mean, 6 shots is a little bit excessive. 2 in the head. Mm-hmm. To me, it seems absolutely incredible. To me, it seems like murder. But, the thing is, we'll have to wait and see how the trial goes. I mean, everybody deserves their day in court. That's a beautiful thing about our legal system. So I don't want to pass judgment without knowing all the facts, but it's definitely excessive, if not outright criminal.
And more facts, as we know, will come to light. A few things we haven't mentioned yet, though, are the different autopsies. One was, you know, commissioned by the family, and there were other autopsies as well. And so I think that the fact that media reporting on this were not handled very well as, you know, what you're mentioning, the militarization of our police force, when we do have citizens that are peaceful, and somehow these other things happen, telling them they can't have their rights, and this way of handling it before it becomes non-peaceful agitates the non-peaceful responses from the public, who are already out in the street because they're distressed and upset and in a lot of pain and grief over a systemic kind of problem that we have to admit, if we go and look at our history and our records, is systemic and not having been addressed for many years. So maybe we have an opportunity there.
I think that we do have an excellent opportunity, you're right, and I think that this should hopefully spur the nation into action. Since the 80s, really, you know, and even later the tough on crime, do caucus on crime. You remember the Willie Horton ad, which is just overtly racist. But, you know, we've come to a point where it just no longer makes sense, because you're more tough on crime, more tough on crime, more tough on crime.
At what point is it a wrong thing?
At what point is it just plain insanity? Well, at what point is it near fascism? But you hit on a really good point, I thought, when you were talking about essentially they're agitating the protesters. I don't know how much you know about the Civil War, but we've learned quite a bit about General Order Number 11. We're kind of making it as a little side project, a documentary. Greg's making a documentary on the Civil War in the area, particularly the Burnt District. But what happened was you had a lot of people that were neutral, and they weren't necessarily against the Union. They weren't necessarily pro-Union, they just wanted to stay out of it. But when Order Number 11 happened, they evacuated all these people from the homes, the military marched in and took over everything. It created a lot of enemies. In my mind, that's a lot of what's happening in Ferguson, is you have peaceful protesters that aren't going to do these violent acts, that aren't going to be looting. But when the police force, the militarized police force, marches in aggressively, as they do, sitting on top of armored vehicles with sniper rifles, it inspires aggression and makes enemies out of the people. You know, you're essentially, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think that, personally, I think the idea of the curfew is insane. I thought that it could have been handled a lot better from a governmental perspective. I think that they should have had, sure, you can have the police ready to go in case something does go awry, but they should have been far away from the protesters and out of sight too. Close enough, but out of sight, because they're just agitating the situation. And it could have been handled a lot better.
And I think that, you know, it's fair for the public to acknowledge that the protesters were simply calling for, you know, justice. They wanted an investigation. They wanted what seemed to them like, as you mentioned, murder, because there are options, in fact, you know, through all of this discourse that's become very public out of, you know, we definitely need to have this public conversation as a nation. And of course, hate that Missouri's in the spotlight really for either of these two things as a nation, but let's just do what we need to do with it, which really is that, you know, really looking at all of these things and how in other countries, both Britain and Germany, I've, you know, seen history from those countries about the killings by the police are like something like 38 in Germany versus thousands, and this is an annual kind of a look in our country. And not only that, but the fact that trained police force can be trained to take people out at the knees. They can
wing them.
Yes, they can harm them enough, but not kill them. So, you know, at the point where we have the two, you know, bullets in the head, and depending on an autopsy report how these bullets entered the arms, you know, there's, it's just really very problematic. And also then how the police wouldn't say anything for a very long time makes people feel like, well, why not, and what's going on? And
it raises a lot of questions.
Raises a lot of questions, and then when they finally do speak, how they couple it with negative footage from this supposed theft. Well, presumably a theft took place, and they're claiming that it was Michael Brown. And then I've seen subsequent to that things coming in on the news that there's another young man who looks very much like, I guess, this the victim, Michael Brown. And you see another YouTube coming out saying that it, was a different person, wasn't Michael Brown. And so an investigation did not really take place to vet this footage and come to a solution or a resolution determination on
trying to poison the well.
So, they're trying to prevent, or they're trying to present that as something relevant to this case that in and of itself hasn't separately been decided who was that person and how did that all take place. So it makes the viewing public, who any of us that want justice, and we want it for everyone, because as you say, there's a lot of people on both sides of the issue, and there's a lot of neutral people that then get drug into one or the other side of the issue by a lot of the echo chamber, if you will, or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
It's a real problem, because whenever I first heard about this, when I first looked into it, just shortly after it happened and got on the news, I wanted vengeance. I was angry. I still am angry. An 18-year-old kid was shot 6 times.
Why do we need to do that?
That's a little bit excessive. We've trained our police force in this country to view themselves as separate from the citizenry. They are the law, and it's becoming dangerous. I think the police should view themselves as part of the citizenry, as one of the people.
They're charged to protect us.
I was angry, and I wanted vengeance. But that's why a court of law, and that's why a society governed by laws is so important, so you don't have people like me just trying to go gain vengeance. It removes the human emotion from the system, and the facts will come out.
Calms everyone
I'm sure
down.
Justice will be served, but the problem is, at this point, everybody's so divided between what's right and wrong, and I'm just angry and just sternly on this one side, but I also recognize that I'm probably blinded by my anger and my own prejudice against militarized law enforcement.
And this would be a good quality, having a candidate that might have a certain passion but recognizes we all are human, we all have our feelings, but we're willing to abide by our laws, and work within the system that we know has served us well over a few hundreds of years or 100 years or more. And so we find that that would be a good quality in an elected official, and we find that, however, we've had things seeping into our laws and changing our laws. That kind of ties in. We'll try to kind of go back and forth on this issue, because there's a lot of tie-in with this farming amendment as an example of changing our laws in favor of a certain viewpoint, in favor of money in our elections, which I know your campaign doesn't have a lot of. And so we have, a Citizens United decision. So it's not only in our electoral system, but it's even in our justice system, where these things are being modified by people with a lot of money that can have influence on our government, and therefore also our justice system by appointed justices, etc. These non-elected and even elected positions. And so this is something that people have been clued in for a long time, but we finally have a little validation so that it's not just us saying it, but Princeton University came out with a study that says, based on their studies and their assessment of our democracy, that we're no longer a democracy, we're an oligarchy. So, that is simply essentially ruled by, maybe not exact definition of fascism, but it's in those kinds of categories that are far enough removed from democracy that it bodes very poorly for our nation.
Yeah.
So this is a campaign that I'm going to ask you, Greg, to maybe talk a little about the campaign, and I know that you don't have a lot of money, so how are you kind of trying to help Nate get these votes, and might give a little perspective on that?
My perspective on the campaign thus far is that it has been an amazing learning experience. I myself have learned, I mean, I've known Nate for 15 years, probably.
Probably more.
We know each other fairly
good.
well. I know a lot about Nate, probably more so than a lot of people. And I've learned a lot, not only about just the character of the man who is Nate, but I've learned that there are things in this campaign that are going to affect people for the good. Mm-hmm. We can actually go out and do things. We can help people, mm-hmm. whether they're veterans, whether they're children, whether they're homeless children and homeless veterans, mm-hmm. whether they're business owners, whether they're, you know, campaign contributors. Just people need to be aware of what's going on. Mm-hmm. I think people need to be aware of their neighbors and their surroundings and think, how can I help someone? And even in a situation where they can't help themselves. Well, when you've reached a situation where you can't help yourself, what can you still do? You can still help someone else.
Right.
You can still look in the mirror and think, I can still do this for that guy or that for that guy. What have I learned is a large amount of things. Just, I mean, policy-related issues, just national issues that have come to light. I mean, I'm always asking Nate questions. Hey, what does this mean? What is this? What is this? And I think that Nate's a good choice for this position because, I mean, you give out your phone number to people. You give out your personal phone number to people. There is no screening of that. Someone has a question, they call Nate, they get an answer. It's immediate. Mm-hmm. There is no calling an assistant, getting an answer, and then getting a phone call later. It's you have a question, you call your representative, or excuse me, your representative-elect, hopefully soon, and you get an answer, and it's just that simple.
I can vouch for that.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, you've given us a good start on why people would like to support Nate. I'd like to chime in with something here in that we had a conversation about energy last night, and it takes a little while sometimes on a big topic like that to figure out what are all the pieces we're talking about, how do each of our perspectives fit in, and that's why we actually have a People's Visioning, because all three of us might have something different to bring to what is our solution for how do we deal with energy. And of course we were talking about, you know, the farming situation. Mm-hmm. And all of these things are interrelated in some way or another because the farming situation also can impact energy. You know, and there are value questions that I hear us discussing today, like, well, you know, is it the right value for us to grow corn with ethanol when we have a warming planet, and then what's the value of how's that being caused or not, and, you know, and how do we all get on the same page with taking action on climate change, you know. And we say that we don't have to argue about who's causing it. We can just say we look and there's a whole lot of pollution happening, and we know that that long term is not sustainable. So if we just cleaned up the pollution, what would those solutions look like? And that might make sense. That would be, you know, a way that most of us could get on the same page instead of argue till it's too late, or, you know, till too many people are suffering and we're just arguing about who's causing it. So let's don't argue about that anymore. Let's just clean up the pollution and move forward. So there are a lot of interrelated pieces. So, you know, with the corn, you know, are we going to plant this GMO corn and douse it with these, you know, toxic forms of pollution? And are we going to impact prices of food, you know, with how we deal with this? So there are a ton of questions, and in the People's Vision, you can bring to our small meetings and our big meetings your ideas, your problems, and we can work on these things. So we're kind of creating a platform of what the people want that we're going to share with whomever gets elected, and we certainly hope it will be somebody that's willing to listen, because we've had problems feeling that our voice is heard. And in our discussion with you on energy, I can vouch that you have a strong opinion. At the same time, you're open to listening to something that might be something you haven't investigated yet, or maybe checking a fact on an exact dollar spot amount and saying, how does that factor into what we're both, all of us, saying here, you know? So I think that that's an experience I could share on behalf of Nate that I have not had with others, and I know that that's a direct personal experience that I appreciate about your character, that you definitely have a strong passion, but you're willing to listen.
What you mean to say is I will listen, but I will not only listen, I will absolutely debate you. And I can be very loud about it, too. But let's
But I
do
think
talk
you come
about
down about reason, though, you know,
Right.
in a debate. You're open to, you don't feel closed to me in a
No,
debate.
absolutely. And if I ever felt closed off to you, Mont, I want you to know this. If I ever felt closed off, I would not speak my mind. But let's do, if we could talk a bit about the Farm Amendment and GMOs, energy.
We want to bring that up here anyway. I'd like to bring that up, but first let me just say to the audience here, hopefully you got out and voted as we were urging you to do, because this is one of the things that's going to matter in every election going forward, and certainly, you know, for whoever wins this contest in District 4 and all the other contests that we are looking at. So if we're satisfied with the status quo, then I guess you probably aren't going to be that energized to go vote. If you're maybe thinking we could do better, or you know, really adamant we could do better, wherever you fall on that spectrum, then certainly we need to get out and vote. We need to educate ourselves. That's what People's Visioning does. We educate about the candidates' positions. We educate on the issues, as you saw us do on the Right to Farm Amendment. And we want to let you know that out of 1 million votes, less than 0.5%. We lost the vote by less than 0.5%, and they're actually still certifying those election results, so we can't give you the exact numbers until probably, I believe, tomorrow. They have to come out and tell us. But we know that it's less than 0.5%. We know that your vote matters. This is a good example, and so if you're watching this and you're maybe not registered to vote, and we encourage you, we hope that watching these programs will make you say, yeah, I need to get out there and vote, and I need to learn about the candidates, and I need to learn about the issues, because in addition to candidates in November, we're going to have issues. We're going to have more constitutional amendments, and many people thought it was kind of an extreme way to go with all these things, that a constitutional amendment seemed too extreme to deal with the particular topics. For instance, how are we going to pay for our highways? To make that a constitutional amendment seems kind of a little bit heavy-handed. And certainly you heard our thoughts on the Farm Amendment similarly. So we lost by a very narrow margin, and we know from the leaders of the campaign that you were able to listen to, and that we will try to put those on YouTube format if you want to go back and listen to those to get more information, because there will be a recount that we're discussing anyway, trying to get that in place. It's easy to request a recount, but you need people to volunteer in each county. So if you're interested to maybe help with a recount and you're watching this, please get in touch with folks at People's Visioning. You can do that on Facebook. Join our Facebook group and just type in your question. Hey, how can I help? How can I get plugged in? Because you can plug in any kind of area, whether it's energy or whether it's farm policy or whether it's these justice issues, because justice across the board for us. Whether it's development, how do we develop our communities, et cetera. So now I'm going to turn it back to you for you to fill in what you would like on this Farm Amendment, your comments.
Well, my thing about it, and I'd helped out quite a bit on it, and also what really was the best thing was being at the polls on Election Day and working the polls for it. My thing was it was just so vague. is just so vague. First of all, we don't need to change the Constitution, and we don't need to make the Constitution a bulletin board where we post every idea on, which the legislature is doing, by the way. They are doing it to pass the buck off and the political problems off onto the people, because then they don't have to come back and say, oh, I voted for this, I voted for that. No, they put it on the people, so the people vote on it. It has nothing to do with democracy. It has everything to do with passing off the political fallout that will inevitably be felt later.
Interjecting on the passing it off to the people, that puts them in a position of having to get an attorney and challenge this in a court.
Right. Well, there's that too. When you change the Constitution,
And who has
it's
the money
going to open
for that, except the
all
big
that
pockets.
litigation. Now, lawyers, they're surely very happy about the passing of this because they're going to make a lot of money off
Guarantees
of it.
their profession.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
already
Gives them jobs. Well, even more jobs than they have, even more money. But, you know, aside from that, it was just so vague. Now, here's the problem with that. When you have a constitutional amendment that no one can make sense of left or right, it opens the door for all sorts of things. The Chinese already own Smithfield Farms, as you well know. And what they want to do is outsource their pork farming to us so they can use our water and pollute our land because they consume such a massive, massive amount of pork. But aside
They've
from
ruined
that,
some of their land now, too.
well,
They've
yeah,
ruined it.
they absolutely have.
And they want to ruin ours,
Yeah.
or they plan to.
Which, I mean, here's the thing. I don't have any. I don't want to, you know, say that I have any problem with the Chinese. I'm not xenophobic or anything like that. I have no problem. It's just that is the end goal. And when you especially look at a world in 2050 where there will be water shortages, we have to start thinking about how to wisely use our resources and save and conserve them. But aside from that, it's just so vague that it could allow other multinational corporations, Russians maybe, Iran, let's just throw out every scary country there is and say that they're going to buy our land. No, I don't want to sound like the sky's falling, but it could theoretically open the door for that to happen. So I'm not saying that it will, it just could, and I think that if, A, we don't need a constitutional amendment. God gave us the right to farm a long time ago. B, yeah, right, we were already farming.
We had the right to farm, that's what we said in the campaign.
B, if we're going to do it, we need to be clear about it, because most of the people I talked to going into the polls,
they didn't understand
it. And exactly. So they just read it and they go, yeah, people should have the right to farm. They didn't even think about it because it just seems like a no-brainer anymore.
Yeah,
but it's so vague. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. You had a lot of corporate money going into there, a lot of oil-bearing money going into there. You know, and that's too bad. Missouri's political system is campaign finance is terrible. Now, on a federal level, there's limits, $2,600 per election for an individual. In Missouri, there's no limits. So if you're, I don't know, Chris Koster, and you're going to be running for governor, as he is, someone can walk up and hand him a $16,000 check. Now, that seems crazy. That seems wild to me.
Or a $50,000 check.
Right, or $1 million, whatever, because there's no cap.
Anything.
There's no limits. So you end up in a situation where you have billionaire brothers from Kansas hijacking Missouri elections, and it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. We've seen that type of thing happen before, just saying. Right. So, you know, we need to have real campaign finance from both on a state and on a federal level. Yeah. We need to have public financing here in Missouri, and we need to have public financing on a federal level, because in my mind, if corporations and special interests are giving you your check, if that's who's paying your bills, you're going to be beholden to corporations and special interests. Right. If the people are the ones paying your bills, who are you beholden to then? The people.
And so that's the thing. If you can contact Nate, he's got a website, and you know, make whatever donation you can make to his campaign. They sorely need the funds, and so we will unabashedly ask for them.
I appreciate
and, you know, because I do know, and I think you can hear, that Nate would represent the people, and I can tell you that for sure. So if you're out there listening, please think about how, even if you maybe don't have money, you can volunteer time. You can, you know, word of mouth, say, hey, check out this guy, you know, and he's got some ideas that I think, you know, might be good, that we need, that I can support. So give if you can, and volunteer if you can. So those are some ways that people could help the campaign.
Yeah.
And So a little bit more then about you too, because you know, talking to you about your campaign also helps us talk about, you know, what do the people want? You know, what is the people's vision? And all of us can get together to say, okay, well, if this is what the people want, how do we get from point A to point Z? Like kind of like we were talking.
Right.
And we can figure that out ourselves together, and certainly we can have a whole lot more help with that if we have people that are willing to work with us to get what the people want in an elected position. So I wanted to go back to you mentioned the billionaire brothers in Kansas. I want to go back to, we did talk about a little bit the Koch brothers. We talked about American Legislative Exchange Council, which is largely supported and interacted with by the Koch brothers. American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. I hope some of you watching may have gone and Google searched them and learned more about them, because essentially they are the top corporations, the Fortune 500 corporations. They're not your family corporations. They're corporations who have a lot of shareholders that they don't even know who they are, and that they are, as in that role, tasked to nothing but produce at the bottom line. And so to them, producing at the bottom line is getting rid of environmental regulations, policies like the Chinese don't have in place, and that when talking about the farming amendment, that folks with supporting these large confined animal feeding operations that are so polluting, or these large corporate-sized models for the farming of corn and the other soybeans, the other types of crops that are done in the large corporate model. Those kinds of farming models that are not, they're the exact opposite of a sustainable model, which is supported by the small family responsible farming, and many of those are smaller family corporations. But they have kind of a different value structure. They want to do it in a way that's not only responsible, but responsible in this case means to, yes, the ethical, you know, humane, water issues. How do I, you know, does my pollution affect my farmer neighbors, or then my, you know, community neighbors beyond the farmer neighbors, you know? And so it was really that group of farmers that stood up against another group of farmers in this farming, right to farm constitutional amendment battle that we kind of aren't really over with, and that we need to make clear that there are connections to these other things. Because the farmers' union, some people don't like unions because they've kind of been fed some sort of reasons why they shouldn't like unions.
They've been lied to.
They've been lied to, essentially. And the unions bring us, you know, a way to counterbalance against a higher power that, without coming together as people, whether it's in any group of types of people, and they call themselves a union in these cases because that's just how they're organizing, you know, together as a brotherhood of, you know, farmers, or a brotherhood of, you know, the trade unions, whatever it happens to be, so that they can have the strength together to speak, you know, with some strength to the powers that otherwise just will plain and simply have no limits, have their rules, have roll over everything.
Right.
So in one way that impacts both your campaign, it impacts what we're seeing in Ferguson, it impacts voter rights in particular, the right to vote, and the right to work, and the right to farm. These things have all come out of this American Legislative Exchange Council.
I love them. Don't you love it? It's hilarious because they call it right to work, right to farm, right to vote, and all of them, every one of them is aimed at taking away that particular right.
Exactly.
And it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. If you have to have such a sleazeball, slimy name, you probably don't vote for it because you know that it's nonsense.
And people are just kind of now starting to get clued in with all of the activism work that we did on the right to farm to try to educate people why this is so bad, where the language is coming from. And in all of these right to this or that, people are finally starting to hear enough through these different ones, and the latest one, the right to farm. They're kind of starting to wake up that that's not so great, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
we
Right to
have
Work
these
kind of got
things.
the ball rolling. Labor did a great job of organizing against Right to Work. I was very, very,
And
very
it's still a
pleased.
problem.
Yeah, it's absolutely. But they did an excellent job. I mean, union membership in Missouri is somewhere between 6 and 8%. But if you think about it, it used to be in the 50s over a third of the workforce, and you had rising wages, you had an expanding middle class.
That's what the results of the unions were.
Late
positive.
70s, when they started going after them, they had a low-wage economy where they just continuously drove down wages or outsourced or automated, whatever it might have been. Everything to cut costs, the American people were buried in the balance sheet. But as they got rid of unions and people lost the ability to organize and really have a say in what their contract is, wages have stagnated since that time. So you have the wealthy getting more and more wealthy because they have a higher savings rate.
Right.
And then you have the rest of us, the middle class, the lower class, has somewhere between 3 and 10% savings rate, if even that. You know, for a lot of the lower class, it's a negative savings rate. And if you think about it, if you're saving only 3% of your income, inflation is taking that value away from you. So you're not actually saving anything, you're just maintaining.
Yeah, and you're not going to have a retirement. And what about all our social safety nets? And then they say, oh, those cost something, so why not pay a wage so that we can,
right. I mean,
support
sure,
ourselves?
raise minimum wage, but as far as the social safety net goes, it's nonsense.
Right.
We could save Social Security right now. Social Security is not in trouble. Just lift the cap.
Right.
For any viewer out there who did not know, over 137, I believe the number is 137,000. Anything over that is not taxed into Social Security. So you're paying 100% of your income into Social Security, but people making a lot of money are only paying a small or insignificant portion of it. If we lifted that cap and they paid the same percentage of their income as you and I do, there would never be a problem with Social Security. In fact, we could give better benefits.
And see, that's a real big point, the fairness, the justice issues, because it's sort of like we have two Americas, you know. When somebody, you know, okay, so we have this low rate, we all pay that low rate. Well, somebody can spin that and make it sound awfully good, like it's true, and there's the kernel of truth of, okay, well, it's fair, we all pay the same rate. But when you look at it, it isn't fair, you know, as you've pointed out. So if we aren't, maybe we all pay the exact same rate on every dollar bill that we have in our, whether it's even in our...
If you only have $10 and you lose $1, that hurts you a lot more than having $1,000 and losing $100. That's just a fact of life.
So, you know, the justice issues and the fairness issues to these things are what I know that you would fight for, and what we know that, you know, we in People's Visioning are trying to do. Both what can we do in our own communities. One thing that we do is organize, but we organize to do things sometimes ourselves, just with our own initiatives that we do. But some of those initiatives, especially bigger initiatives like energy, we have to interact with different agencies, other larger organizations, and also our political system. We can't, it's too big, it's something that we have to all bring ourselves to. So we kind of have that conversation.
Sometimes the federal government can be useful. Who knew?
Yes.
Right?
Well, they built our roads, and that's kind of what we're looking at
internet,
with energy.
water.
You know?
Like, it's incredible that they've come to hate the federal government so much. It makes no sense. But no, I do love what you guys are doing, because you have this idea that communities, you can sort of have community solutions to community problems, which is very much something I agree with. I think that people that face the issues every day have a unique and better perspective on what the most important issues are, rather than just what the media says. You know, the media says, oh, you should care about this right now, or you should care about whether it be minimum wage, whether it be voter fraud, or whatever they want you to think about that day, that week, that month.
And we have to think of who owns most of the media.
Right. You know, so I like what you're doing, because people in the communities know what their problems are better than someone sitting at a desk in Washington, and definitely better than Rupert Murdoch or any of his minions do. Like, the idea that communities can not only identify but then have unique and better solutions for their own problems, and the people come together to decide and solve it for themselves, that's an excellent thing. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome, and we just are glad to do it. But the main thing, and I'm going to give a little pitch for us right now, because the more people that we have who bring their problems and their solutions to this platform. We have actually 10 different organizational co-sponsors of People's Visioning, and we'd love to grow that number, but it's a good, decent number to get us rolling with. And so we want to invite you to come to an event that we're having this coming Saturday, August 30th. It will be held in Columbia, but we have a model, a template actually, that can be worked in any community. A People's Visioning chapter could start in any community, and we recognize, that you could tweak what we've brainstormed here to your community. You could look at our ideas so that you can hit the ground running and don't have to spend that time immediately to come up with all of this work. And it was quite a bit of work that we did. And we're kind of sharing it with folks who want to replicate in their communities and then, tailor it to their communities or choose something out of there that they think can happen in their community. Because we trust also that the people in your own communities know what the deepest problems are and might have some good solutions. In fact, that's where most of our inventions come from, is just the garage,
Yeah.
the garage inventor, of ingenuity. So we invite you as the viewers to join us because we need your help. And we all need each other. And I hope that events on the ground are showing us that we need more people to come to the movement, that that we're in a range that if more people came, we could accomplish a great deal together, because a lot of people get apathetic and they say, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or it's too big, the problem's too big, and we can't do anything about it. But I think Right to Farm, the Farming Constitutional Amendment, showed us that the people got out there. We had no money. Till the very end, we had some money, and it kind of almost even dinged us.
It seemed a hopeless fight, but I mean, the people came together and almost.
So this is
close.
What we can do. It was, a near tie, essentially, and who knows what the recount will show. But we do, in all the counties where this is being broadcast, we do need a few folks to help with that recount. So you can plug in at this meeting on Saturday. It's going to be in Columbia. We have a Facebook event. You can find it by People's Visioning on Facebook, and the People's has an apostrophe at the end of the S. You won't find us if you type it in differently, because many people own the Visioning. So that's how you have to type it in. And you can link in, find out the details on this meeting that we're having, and you can go on to that Facebook event that you'll easily find on our Facebook page and invite all your friends and get connected that way. We also have one of our co-sponsors hosts information about us that's almost taken over their issue a little bit at the time being, because they see how we are trying to work on that issue too. But Columbia Climate Change Coalition.org will also have contact information for us and ways that you can learn more about us beyond this one event coming up. So if you can't make this event, still plug in, because we have all the way till November. We're going to try to organize special voter registrations. We have until October the 8th. To get folks registered up until to be able to vote in this upcoming election. It was always a goal of People's Visioning, and we've kind of done it periodically as we've had the manpower to do it all the way through, because we recognize that, hey, so big deal, there's a lot of excitement about November, we need to go register, and that's helpful. But it needs to be an ongoing process all the time, pretty much. And because there's always the next election, we've got to start plugging in. So there are a lot of ways you can get involved, a lot of ways you can help. You can bring your problems that are your passions. And because we are a whole vision, We have a lot of different areas that we work in: development and finance, energy, transportation and infrastructure, ballot efforts, educating people on registering to vote, our neighborhoods. We work a lot on how do we help our neighborhoods. That kind of fits into this whole thing that's happened in Ferguson, because we are about social, economic, cultural, racial, environmental justice issues. So all of these justice issues and getting justice for everyone, not just for some, you know, that our rules apply to everyone equally. And so we have food and water security. That's kind of where we came to bat on the farm, right to farm amendment. We have public health that we work in, zoning and land use. That's kind of a big kind of head-butting issue that we have to just wrestle with as a people. Education is another key area. So anywhere your passion happens to be, you can find a special place to plug in. And we have small working groups that help develop some of our policies and make our policies better with different people's input. We have some energy policies that we're just trying to share with Nate so he can think about, you know, maybe he likes some of those and he might like to include them in his platform. So we have other policies we'll share with all the candidates too. And we also have a student group. So any of you that are young people, whether you might know students, whether they're at the University of Missouri or other smaller schools and colleges, right now we invite any student to join our People's Visioning Mizzou group. Again, People's with the apostrophe at the end of the S, but People's Visioning Mizzou, M-I-Z-Z-O-U. Join that and just say, hey, I'm from X and X, you know, school or college, or maybe you're a Mizzou student, which of course we certainly want to focus on the Mizzou students. But we'll help all the college or trade schools or whatever, Moberly Area Community College, Stevens, all these different ones, Columbia College certainly, and all the different trade colleges too. So jump on there and just join our Facebook group and start the conversation. Say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm maybe not at Mizzou, or I'm at Mizzou and I'm interested in this aspect of what you're doing, or, you know, when's our next meeting, you know, that kind of thing. So definitely want to, you know, invite people to get involved with People's Visioning. And I'm just going to say a couple little things here about People's Visioning too, and then I want to ask you if you have other comments to add to whatever that you may want, not to what I've missed. But on the energy question and on solar and those kinds of things, one of our ideas and something we can kind of mark off of our bucket list already, and we are barely 2 years old. We'll be celebrating our second year at this August 30th event. We're having a potluck, you know, kind of making it sort of both fun and family-like, because that's what we are. We're the people, and, you know, we are all family, you know, as a people. So we had the opportunity to work with the city and another organization, again, how we kind of collaborate with lots of people, and to take ideas out of the people's ideas from our energy group and do a community demonstration project of an affordable net zero energy home. And a net zero home is when at the end of the year your utility bill averages out to be zero, because it has very high energy efficiency in the way it's built and in its appliances, but even before that in its design with passive solar design, and then at the end with on-site generation. So it has passive and active generation using, in this case, solar, but it could be other things too. It could be wind, and it could also be geothermal, different kinds of things. We have some, we did some numbers, and we have a different source rather than geothermal for this affordable home, but it's being built with the partnership of Habitat for Humanity, and folks know their work, and it is an affordable net zero energy home. So some months you might have to pay a little bit on your utility bill, other months you'll break even or actually you know, make a little money. And again, that's what a net zero building would be, whether it's a home or some other, you know, type of building. And so one of our policies on the policy end is to see that all future buildings are required to be built in this manner. But first, super efficient, because any building can put on a ton of, on-site generation and sort of be still kind of wasteful, but it makes sense to be efficient and not wasteful first. And so that's one of our things that we're feeling really good about. It's going to be finished later this fall, but it's kind of an update we'll talk about at our meeting, and we'll have other candidates that we'll be talking about, and ways that people can just get educated. We'll be talking about a platform that we're working with others to link people to, where you can, people that are already elected, you can put information about how they're doing in their job to serve you, and what some of the upcoming issues are, and how you might like them to vote, and how you can get in touch with them, and these sorts of things. So we're trying to really organize on lots of different levels. But yeah, I just wanted to ask if you had any thoughts on energy or any other areas we haven't touched on, such as we've touched on the Ferguson and the civil rights, or we've touched on the food policies, but if there's any other thoughts you want to mention on anything.
On energy, I think one of the big problems that we kind of face, and this actually comes down because you're talking a lot about communities, and this does come down to the communities, is the planning, zoning, and land use in the area. Because you run into a lot of problems where maybe a town might have wind, pardon me, where they might have wind energy, and then they can't get used to the land that would be the best possible place to put it. For instance, a town I know of, they were going to have turbines, and it would have been one of the first towns in Missouri to be completely green energy, because it would all come from the wind turbines. However, there was an airport in the optimal place to put the wind farm, and this airport had some planes, none of which were owned by, I don't think any, maybe one person in town had a plane out there. The rest were from the city.
Were they private planes, like
they
a
were
private airport? That it wasn't like serving?
Well, it's a city-owned airport, but they were private planes.
A city-owned airport, okay.
Right, and they could have put it there, but because of the two, maybe three planes that were in this airport being stored there, they threw a fit. The council decided against it. It all got shut down. You end up having a lot of situations like that where your best place to have these green energy options.
Something positive, yeah.
Right. The folks who have the power in the local community, and yes, I do mean rich people. You know, if it gets in their way, they'll shut it down. People who can afford airplanes. Let's just call a spade a spade. Rich people who have airplanes when the rest of us don't. They didn't like it, so they shut it down. You run into a lot of things like that, and it's not just. Let me just say this: it's not just rich folks. There's a whole NIMBY thing.
Yes,
you know,
it's a NIMBY thing, and it's not only wealthy people, because some people that have money have different sets of values. So I think, but by and large, we do find, you know, sometimes there are some issues in that area for certainly. And so I agree. I
mean, it's a whole NIMBY thing for sure, but the thing is, in that particular situation, and many like them that you hear of, it was essentially people who had a lot of influence, whether it be maybe a less than good type of influence, aka bribery, or whether it be just the prestige of that person influencing the smaller town council member. Either way, they had undue amount of influence over the council relative to what normal people who would have loved to have that better and lower energy cost.
Yeah, so it kind of boils down to a couple of things there. It's like, you know, we have to understand that we do live in a society, and some of us might have more, some of us have less, and we're not necessarily saying everyone should have the same. It's fine to, you know, benefit off your work.
Oh, absolutely.
What people are saying, I think, in this area is the lack of fairness, and then, as you just brought up again, and we did touch on this earlier, you know, you end up being beholden to what do the people who pay for your campaigns want when you get in office, and the whole Citizens United thing, and it's like 80% of the people in the U.S. are very close to that. That's like upper 70s to 80% of the people are saying they don't like the Citizens United for these very reasons we're talking, because it gives some people,
undue
people
influence to people who can afford it.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
politicians
it
are corrupt.
fair.
They're becoming more and more corrupt all the time.
Right, and it isn't fair.
Yeah. No, it's not fair. I don't have $600,000 to throw at a primary election, do you?
No, and
No.
besides that, and we have to ask ourselves, you know, because I feel like I don't want to cast aspersions on all people who have wealth, because let me just say this, if I became a wealthy person, I would know what I would feel good about doing with my money. And there was a young lady who spoke at the United Nations conference, and she was addressing this issue. And she was like 12 or 13. She was part of a group called ECHO, and it's just a small handful of young teens. And they had gone to, they had raised money for themselves to go to a United Nations conference in one of the South American countries, and they'd gone to the favelas and talked to the children. They themselves still are children, and they talked to the children that lived in the streets, and they talked about a lot of things. But one of the things was that she shared in her talk to this United Nations assembly was that these young children that they talked to said, you know, if I were rich, I would, you know, take care of these young children. I would build the houses. And
yeah, but they're also not rich, and they're saying that, so they have an entirely different perspective.
But they know if they got rich, they know that. Some of the things they would do with that money.
Right, but I'm saying, why is that, and why do they have these ideas? Because they're not rich.
Well, and
they have an entirely different perspective because they weren't raised in some privileged, isolated world. I have no problem with people making more money than God. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. What I have a problem with is the absolute rapidly growing gap of wealth inequality in this country. And what I have a massive problem is with those with the ability to do it and the power. And in this society, money is power.
Yes.
So what I have a problem with is our political system has been taken over, completely bought out, and our politicians have become corrupt because of people who have this money and can put undue influence on it. Particularly financial people on Wall Street, they are the worst about it.
And it's really nice that the people here have been saying this for a while have been validated by Princeton, who says that we are an oligarchy, which is exactly what you're describing. And so I think that that can happen. Part of what I'm getting at here is that the way that this heartlessness, I guess, can happen is because of the lack of perspective. That the folks in, you know, people are born into a certain experience, and they don't put themselves in another experience. And so these people born into a different experience, were they then to have that capability, they would know because of that exposure to a different, you know, situation, what they would do.
Yeah,
we have just a few minutes, so we're going to wrap up. But
if Vicky Hartzler had ever gone hungry, she probably wouldn't be voting to cut SNAP funding.
So that's a good point, I guess, to end on, because, you know, we have to, if we are a caring society, and I think we want to believe that we are, while maybe there could be some improvements in any program, we certainly don't want, while maybe those improvements are being investigated by the people in the neighborhoods who would like good jobs. They, for the most part, want to work. It makes them feel better about themselves.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And it gives them, you know, value. There's a shame, you know, that they can't, you know, support their children, you know, for most people who have the values. So, yeah, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up, because you know, we take it to the neighborhoods to bring these solutions, and we would say that from our experience, you know, there's not that much cleaning up that needs to be done out of the folks who, it's just this huge gap of inequality that's making it harder and harder and harder. So yes, if we are a society that cares about one another and are not heartless, you know, we would provide these assistances until, you know, we could provide something for them to you know, teach them how to fish, give them the pole and teach them how to fish, and they're on their own kind of thing. So it's not like constant handouts that people always argue about.
It's about a hand up. Sometimes folks just need a hand up. It's not about a handout. It's not about a handout, it's about a handout. I mean, this idea that people just don't want to work, that they're just lazy, that's just wrong. That's misinformed.
There might be a few people, but by and large, it's like in anything, there's maybe a few that fits with, but that isn't the vast majority. So
it's such
why
a tiny, minuscule percent. It doesn't even register in my mind.
So why punish the other people because of that? Just kind of find ways to make that part better and shrink it a little bit more, because you're actually getting to those people and helping them out of their way of thinking too. So that's kind of what we try to do with People's Visioning. So thank you so much for being on.
Hey, thank you for having us.
I was wanting to ask you about your documentary. I don't know that we have time, but maybe we'll invite you both on again. And you know, if you have a closing remark, though, I would like to ask you.
I do have a closing remark. It has nothing to do with my documentary, but I would encourage everyone, if you have the means, to donate anything to our campaign. This isn't about special interest money, it's about general interest money. Please donate at www.irvinforcongress.com. That's F-O-R, not the number 4. Please contribute anything you can. If you can't contribute money, feel free to contribute your time, your knowledge, your wisdom. Thank you.
Yes, and so we'll just close by joining us at People's Visioning. Right now, connecting with us on Facebook is a way to keep in touch. I will also give you my email and phone number, and Sheila can put it on the screen. It's mntwelch1@gmail, and I'm Monta Welch. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the director of People's Visioning. I'm good at introducing everyone else, but here we're the people. So, you know, we, you know, are getting more polished with this as we go along, but it's a real people's effort. And you can also contact me at 573-777-2216. Text message is good there. And that's a way that you can connect with us longer term to maybe help with Nate or other people's campaigns that we're also trying to, we need a sea change in our governance to move us away from the oligarchy that we've become and back towards democracy. So we ask you to join us and get involved. We don't want to lose by just a few votes in November, so your vote matters. Thanks.